Hi and welcome to Festive Franklins. Today we're showing you how to make one of these lovely Christmas cards using free motion embroidery. So you'll need a blank greetings card and then a small piece of paper that I tend to use to draft myself a kind of a target area because you don't want to cover the entire Christmas card. So I've cut that out to the shape that I want it to be. And then I'm going to use a plain piece of fabric of the colour that I want, and I'm going to lay my target area over it and use one of these heat erasable pens just to draw the target area onto the fabric. So you can just see the pink pen marks there. This is a piece of, a piece of stitch and tear interfacing or stabilizer that you can use while you're sewing. It just helps add structure to the fabric so that it doesn't get puckered when you're sewing with it. And then you're going to start to draw your branch within your target area with a bit of a gentle curve like that, and then you can give yourself a few guidelines of where you'd like your branches to be. This is kind of quite freestyle, but it's just nice to give yourself a bit of a guide. And then you'll be drawing little lines that you'll be attaching your stockings to. So just to give you an idea of where those are going to go, I draw those lines in as well. Then you're going to need to cut yourself out a template for the stocking, so it needs to be the right size for the kind of the target window and the piece of drawing that you've already done. So I like to hold it just against that so I can check the size is correct. And then you can use a piece of card or paper and cut your stocking out. There we go. And then I like to use quilting cottons. These are 100% cottons. There we go. We've got some stockings ready to go. So take it over to your sewing machine. You're going to need to put your free motion foot on, and you do that by taking the ankle off the bottom of the machine and then slotting the free motion foot in its place, and then just tighten it up with your screwdriver. So I'm using a Juki DX5 for this, which is my machine at home. And then you're going to have to drop your feed dogs so they don't start moving your fabric around where you don't want it to. This machine has a free motion stitch, so I'm going to set that up now. If you want to check your manual for your own sewing machine and see the best settings for doing free motion sewing with it. There we go. So this is my piece of fabric with my stabilizer behind it, the stitch and tear. And your foot, when the presser foot's down, just needs to hover about 1 millimetre or so above the fabric so that you can move it. I do a few stitches and then I get my scissors in there and I chop the starting thread out of the way so it doesn't get in the way for me. And then you can just start to sew, and you can move your fabric in any direction that you want. It takes a little bit of time to get the hang of this, so if you struggle at first, that's normal, don't worry. We will be doing an in-person class at Franklin's in Ipswich next year on how to do free motion, but it just takes a little bit of getting used to, balancing the speed the needle is going at with the speed at which to move your hands. And then you're just going to sew along the branch. So I'm using a brown thread at the moment. It's a Gutermann thread. A better quality of thread is going to help your machine. So just stitching along the lines, and as you can see, I'm adding in extra branches as I go, kind of within the ones that I've already popped in as my base branches. And there's no real right or wrong way of how to do this. Obviously, the more you stitch back over the same line, the thicker the line is going to get, so just bear that in mind. But really, it doesn't matter. It's a sketch that you're doing almost, so when you go back over your previous stitch lines, it just looks sketchy. There we go. So that's my branch. Then I've switched over to a green thread now, and in the end I used 2 different colours of green thread, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a few stitches just to lock my stitching in place, and I'm going to come round and trim the starting thread. A good sharp pair of scissors really helps here. So yeah, I ended up using 2 different colours of green thread. I used kind of a darker one here, and then I switched to a lighter one in a second when I go around and kind of fill in there. So these are like fir pine needles that we're sewing at the moment, so it's just lots of lines backwards and forwards. Gets quite hypnotic, I think, when you're doing free motion. It's quite a soothing way of sewing, chills you out. So just take your time, there's no rush. But with free motion, the faster you're going, the freer and the easier everything tends to move. Feels a bit strange and counterintuitive when you start. You want to go slower so you have more control, but actually you get greater control and a greater kind of quality of stitching if you go a bit faster. So just backwards and forwards, just to kind of flesh out the branch and give it lots of pine needles like this. And they all need to kind of face mostly in the same direction. I do a few that cross and go in other directions because you know what it's like with your Christmas tree. You get some wonky pine needles and things like that. There we go. So that's the dark thread finished. And then I switch over to a lighter green thread. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to lock the first few stitches, trim that thread, and then continue stitching. So I'll be stitching in amongst the darker green thread that I've already done some of the pine needles with, and I'm just throwing some green needles in with that as well. It just gives it more of a 3D kind of effect if you have some lighter and some darker stitching. Makes it look a little bit more lifelike. I'll do a few longer straggly looking needles as well. And a few bits that kind of branch off. And just kind of plump everything out a little bit, looks a bit better. There we go, so that's kind of an additional put there. And then I'm going to go back in amongst the dark threads and add some lighter coloured needles in as well. Just backwards and forwards. It's a lovely thing to do. If your blood pressure's up a little bit, this will soon bring it down. There we go. So in amongst the dark needles, I'm just adding lots of the light ones, just to flesh it all out a little bit. Now there are lots of different cards you can do. I've done ones with candles on before. I've done ones with little robin redbreast. Everyone loves a robin redbreast this time of year. And then for the stockings, I use a Prim Aqua glue marker just to stick them in place. But any kind of fabric glue just to hold it in place while you're sewing is a good idea. Stop it moving around too much. And then you just sew around the stocking, and I've chosen a complementary colour, but one that stands out a little bit so you can see the stitching around the stocking. And then you're going to make almost like a loop shape up towards the branch of the tree, and then back round the other side, so it's got like you're making a hanging loop for the stocking. And then continue around the other side and all the way around the stocking again. Just thickens the line up a little bit. I always go around things twice, just makes them look a little bit better. There we go. And then you can trim off, and that's your stocking done. So we'll go around the brown one as well. Now I'd already gone around this in a slightly lighter colour, like the sandy colour that's almost the same as the stocking, and I decided it wasn't bright enough. I wanted it to be a bit more obvious, so I then went round in a slightly darker brown colour. It just looks a little bit better. I think you can see what's going on. It stands out a bit more. So you're going to make your loop again and then just continue around the stocking. There we go, around the toe. As I say, just something to hold the stocking in place while you're sewing really helps with these smaller pieces. With bigger pieces you can hold them as you go, but with these smaller pieces a bit of glue really helps. Then I'm just going to give it a bit of a press to relax it. Lots of dense stitching does tend to pucker the fabric a bit, even with a stabiliser behind it, but you could always hoop the fabric if you were worried about that. I'm not particularly. Then I'm going to take off my free motion foot and put my regular presser foot back on again. There we go, tighten that up. If I can keep hold of the screwdriver, that would help. There we go. Lovely. Then I'm going to go back to my straight stitch. You'll need to put your feed dogs back on again for this bit as well. And then I cut my piece of fabric out along the target lines that I drew in pink right at the beginning with pinking shears. You don't need to use pinking shears, but A, I think it looks quite cute, and B, it stops it from fraying. And then you're going to stick it to the front of your card, and then you're just going to sew all the way around with a normal straight stitch that you can trim off. And there we go, that's your handmade Christmas card. Isn't it a cutie? Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed your free motion sewing, and we'll see you soon. Bye.